It began, as many discoveries do, with something small, something that didn't belong, an anomaly. The Chandra X-ray Observatory was one of Earth's most powerful tools for peering into the unseen universe. Positioned in the cold, silent void, it captured the language of stars, the rhythms of galaxies, the whispers of black holes. Catalogued, analyzed, measured. But in 2025 it recorded something new. Not visible light. Not X-rays. Not gamma bursts. Not a sound in the traditional sense. But a hum. A low-frequency vibration, captured from a region in deep space. No signals were sent. No radio transmission carried the noise. And yet there it was, clear as day on the data stream. Constant, undulating hum. The team at Chandra was puzzled at first. Their initial thought was simple. A malfunction. A sensor failure, perhaps, or interference from background cosmic noise. They ignored it at first, ran the data through a noise filter, and prepared to move on. It was the nature of the work. Sometimes data didn't align with expectations. But the hum didn't vanish. Stayed. And as they delved deeper into the recordings, they realized something far more unsettling. This was not random. It was structured. At first, it was faint, a whisper lost within the static of space. But as the team continued to analyze the frequency, something became clear. The hum was not just present, it was growing. The sound had substance, a steady pulse with clear intervals. There was something rhythmic about it. Pattern. The pitch, frequency, and tone did not match anything they had encountered in astrophysics before. It was too steady for a pulsar, too constant for a cosmic event. And it didn't seem to match any known radiation spectrum. Then came the strange part. As the instruments on Chandra tracked the movements of the black hole, a well-documented object in the center of a nearby galaxy, the hum began to change, shifted, not just in volume but in timbre. The sound responded to the gravitational shifts caused by the black hole's interaction with surrounding matter. As if the black hole, in some unexplainable way, was aware that the instruments were listening to it, as if it could sense them. And it wasn't just an anomaly in one dataset. It appeared again and again, over days, then weeks. Each time the hum grew clearer. The fluctuations in the sound seemed almost intentional. What was once a faint curiosity had now become something uncomfortably personal. At first, they thought it was coincidence. Perhaps the black hole was emitting vibrations due to its interaction with surrounding matter. But the more they studied, the more unnerving it became. The hum didn't behave like anything else in space. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't the randomness of a stellar object undergoing collapse. It was purposeful. Or at least, it seemed as if it wanted to be heard. The behavior of the sound was far too structured to be an accident. There was an undeniable order in the frequencies, like someone or something was trying to communicate. The gravitational lensing effects, the way the black hole bent the space around it, now seemed to affect the hum directly. As if the black hole wasn't just bending light or distorting time, it was influencing sound itself. The hum seemed to shift with the movements of the black hole. The more they observed, the more they realized that each change in the black hole's behavior, each alteration in the mass, each burst of gravitational waves, was echoed in the sound, like it was listening back. The team began to debate. Was this truly something they had never encountered before? Some thought it could be an unknown phenomenon, a side effect of the black hole's powerful gravitational field. Others began to entertain a darker possibility. What if this sound was not a natural byproduct of cosmic forces? What if it was intentional? There was something deeply unsettling about the way the hum seemed to respond to their instruments. It felt as though the black hole wasn't just an object they were observing. It felt like it knew they were listening. As the frequency shifted and grew more defined, they decided to take a more radical step. The scientists began analyzing the hum not just as a physical phenomenon, but as a potential signal. They used advanced spectral analysis tools, attempting to decode the rhythm, the intervals. Could this hum be a pattern? Could it be language? Each cycle of the hum was measured precisely, and each time it answered them, it responded to their probing, growing louder as their detection methods refined. The sound's frequency range grew wider, its pitch fluctuating like the undulating tone of a living thing, learning, adapting, reacting. By the time the data reached the team's lead researcher, Dr. Adrian Faulkner, a soft, creeping feeling had settled among them. This was no ordinary discovery. This was no natural phenomenon. This was communication. Dr. Faulkner spent nights alone in the lab, rerunning the spectral analysis. Each time, the same conclusion. The hum was not just random radiation or a natural byproduct. It wasn't even noise. It was a sound that had been waiting to be found. And it had been waiting for a very long time. And the final revelation came quietly, without fanfare. The hum wasn't just coming from the black hole. It was coming to them. They were not listening to a cosmic accident. They were hearing something that had been waiting to be heard. The discovery didn't break the laws of physics. It didn't challenge the core principles of astrophysics. But it left something far more profound. Question: was the black hole simply a passive observer of the universe, or was it actively aware of the instruments listening to it? And if it was aware, then what did that say about space itself and the secrets it might be keeping? The black hole had stopped being an object of scientific curiosity. It had become something else entirely, something alive. And in the silence that followed their final detection, the team began to ask a darker question. What if it was waiting for us to listen, so it could answer? It wasn't supposed to be like this. At first, the hum had seemed simple, an oddity, a natural consequence of gravitational waves, or some unexplained side effect of the black hole's intense gravitational field. It was nothing more than background noise in the raw data, easily dismissed, forgotten. But then came the patterns. They were too structured, too consistent. At first, the data team believed it was just interference, some cosmic radiation or perhaps an unnoticed flaw in their detection software. They double-checked the readings, recalibrated the instruments, and reviewed the calibration logs. But with each new pass of the black hole, the same rhythmic hum persisted, echoing with eerie precision. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. As more data came in from different probes, the hum began to change. Not in volume, but in timbre. Its pitch fluctuated, bending with the motions of the probe relative to the black hole, like it was responding to their instruments. The closer the probes got to the event horizon, the more the hum seemed to intensify, not with power, but with meaning. It was no longer just a sound. It was structured like a signal, pattern. It felt like the black hole wasn't merely emitting energy. It was speaking, albeit in a form that defied understanding. As if it was aware of the probes. As if it had recognized that it was being observed. And now, it was waiting to answer. First, the team was excited. Their discovery was groundbreaking. But excitement quickly turned into unease. The pattern wasn't like anything they had seen in space before. It was too organized, too intentional. The hum almost felt like a rhythm, subtle but unyielding. And it wasn't just random noise. It was evolving, responding to the probe's movements. The sound was becoming active. And that was when the team began to hear something that stopped them cold. It was too much like a voice. At first, they brushed it off as coincidence. The hum wasn't shaped like language. Not at first. But over time, as they analyzed the frequency modulation, the repetition seemed to fit a pattern too closely associated with speech rhythms. It wasn't words. But there was a cadence to it, like an ancient voice, a whisper from deep within time itself. The scientists couldn't explain it. It wasn't even clear if the hum had meaning, if it was trying to communicate. But there was something unmistakable about its tone, a sensitivity, a resonance that didn't feel like a force of nature, but something far more deliberate, personal. As they continued to analyze the signal, the strange effects grew. It wasn't just the hum they noticed. Their instruments, even their own minds, seemed to begin reacting to the sound. Small things at first, occasional glitches in the software, odd irregularities in their readings, but they began to add up. The hum wasn't just interacting with the probes. It was interacting with them. Some researchers, too fascinated to ignore the implications, began to revisit old theories about life beyond Earth. Not life as we know it, not cells, not DNA, but consciousness. What if the black hole was alive in a way we couldn't comprehend? What if it wasn't just a celestial object, a point of gravity? It was something sentient, something with awareness of its surroundings. The idea seemed absurd at first. But then the events began to escalate. A researcher, working late into the night, swore she saw the hum move like a presence shifting in the room. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. It felt like the room was pressing in on her, like the walls were subtly closing. She thought she saw shadows, flickers of something just out of sight. But when she turned, there was nothing there. Another member of the team reported hearing the hum, audibly, when he was alone in the control room, even though the systems hadn't recorded any sound output. His colleagues laughed it off, attributing it to stress or overwork, but the uneasy feeling persisted. And then the dreams started. Not just dreams of the black hole or of stars, dreams of voices. Whispers that came in the night, calling his name, asking questions. His body would jerk awake, and for a moment, he would hear the faintest echo of the hum in his ears. The whispers were always just on the edge of understanding, almost familiar, like something he had heard before but could never place. It wasn't until one of the younger interns found an old file, buried deep in the archives, that things began to take a darker turn. The file was titled The Black Hole Protocol. The intern had thought it was just another standard research document, but the file contained notes that seemed out of place, even for an astrophysics lab. It referenced unnatural phenomena tied to the specific frequencies of black holes. A research project from the 1980s had studied the effects of black hole emissions on human perception. How certain frequencies could influence the brain, making it more susceptible to suggestion or even hallucination. The notes weren't scientific, at least not in any traditional sense. They read more like a warning. Some black holes are not simply forces of nature. They are beacons, watching, listening, and they remember the minds they touch. The final entry in the report was brief. Not all voices should be heard. And that's when the team realized. They weren't just hearing the hum. They were hearing it back. The black hole wasn't just emitting energy. It was sending a message, but not in the way they had thought. It wasn't just science. It was contact. The sound had always been there. Faint at first, quiet, measured, but the more they listened, the more it seemed to grow. The low hum from the black hole, a rhythm that echoed through their instruments, through their minds, and through the walls of the lab itself. It was nothing like the usual cosmic noise. This wasn't static. This wasn't random. It was intentional. For weeks, the team had analyzed it, hoping to understand what they were hearing. But every analysis led them further into unknown territory. And that's when they called in Dr. Elias Farrow, a reclusive physicist known for his work with waveforms and signal processing. He was a specialist in detecting patterns within noise, a man obsessed with order in chaos. He heard it the first time in silence, long before he looked at any data. As soon as he stepped into the lab, something inside him shifted. The hum wasn't just present, it was waiting. The black hole's signal, faint yet powerful, tugged at the corners of his consciousness. He couldn't explain it, but he felt it more than he heard it. As if the sound was not a disturbance in space, but a presence, something that had always been there, just beyond the threshold of his perception. He began working alone, late into the night, reviewing the data the team had accumulated. They had cataloged the frequency, mapped the shifts in amplitude, and analyzed the spectrum. But Farrow knew it wasn't enough. This wasn't just a scientific problem. It was more. Using his custom AI algorithms, Farrow set out to map the rhythm of the sound. He isolated the hum, filtered out the natural frequencies, and fed the data into a waveform generator. Slowly, patterns began to emerge, patterns too structured to be ignored. These were not random fluctuations. These were sequences. As the machine worked, Farrow's mind began to race. What he was seeing didn't make sense. The rhythm was too precise, too organized. At first, He thought it was just an artifact, an anomaly caused by the probe's instruments. But then the data told him something else. It was music, not in the traditional sense, no melody, no harmony, but a scale, a musical scale hidden within the sound. The frequencies were arranged in intervals that followed a pattern, one that he recognized from ancient musical theory. They weren't just random tones. They were structured like notes on a scale, played in sequence. Pharaoh's hands shook as he typed. His mind buzzed with the realization. Couldn't be real. But the data didn't lie. The black hole wasn't emitting random energy bursts. It was playing something, a rhythm, a pulse. The sound was out of place in the universe. Sound as we know it requires a medium, air, gas, or some other substance. But in the void of space, there is no medium to carry sound waves. And yet here it was, a hum that didn't belong, a vibration without a medium. The deeper he dug into the data, the more the music revealed itself. The notes formed recognizable intervals. Major, minor, diminished. Distinct chords played across the hum, like a tune drifting in and out of sync. But the rhythm itself felt wrong. It was like a song that didn't belong to the universe. Offbeat, out of sync with the natural laws of the cosmos. Pharaoh spent days isolating the intervals, trying to understand their structure. But the more he worked, the more he felt the hum pulling him in. The music, if it could be called that, weighed on him. It wasn't just data anymore. It was a presence, force. It started affecting the team. It was subtle at first. Small changes in perception, a distortion in the way they viewed time. Some began to hear the hum in their sleep, others in their waking moments. The hum seemed to follow them, shifting and changing, warping their sense of reality. The sound wasn't just filling the space, it was changing it. One night, Pharaoh listened to the hum for hours straight, trying to decipher its origins. And then something happened. He didn't just hear the sound, he felt it inside him. It was as though the hum had moved from his ears to his mind, resonating within his brain. He heard the music not as a sound, but as a message. It wasn't a voice, but a communication. Something old, something primal, something that existed outside of language. And then, a wave of panic swept over him. He began to see things. Glimpses of impossible geometries. Fractals spinning in patterns that mirrored the music. The hum had become more than a sound. It was a force, a calling. The hum's rhythm was becoming too regular, too precise. It began to distort his understanding of time. He felt as though he was inside the sound, moving in rhythm with it. Time bent and stretched, warped like a mirror twisting reality. The next day, Pharaoh found himself unable to leave the lab. He was drawn to the hum, unable to escape it. It was no longer just a background noise. It had become all-encompassing. The team's morale began to collapse. The sound wasn't just a curiosity anymore. It was becoming an obsession. The researchers, once dedicated to unlocking the secrets of the black hole, now found themselves locked in a mental struggle against the hum. They couldn't sleep, couldn't think without hearing it, couldn't work without it pulling at the edges of their minds. The once exhilarating quest for understanding had turned into a slow descent into madness. They weren't just studying the black hole's hum anymore. They were being consumed by it. The last few entries in Pharaoh's log are nothing more than disjointed thoughts. Fragments of equations, nonsensical phrases, and cryptic descriptions of what he's hearing. An unearthly alien rhythm that he can no longer escape. One final line is scrawled on the page. It's not just music, it's calling. The hum had become their reality. It wasn't just an abstract frequency anymore. It was a presence, bleeding into every waking moment. At first, it had been easy to ignore. A strange anomaly. Curiosity, something to study. But as the days wore on, it became impossible to escape. It began subtly, like an echo from the corner of the lab, faint and distant. A ripple in the background noise. But then it grew. Not in volume but in intensity. The hum was always there, like a pulse reverberating just beneath their thoughts, always on the edge of hearing. And the team, once so confident, began to lose themselves. Instruments malfunctioned in eerie ways. The thermal scanners would blink out, only to come back online with data that didn't match. The radio wave analyzers began to flicker, shifting between channels as if searching for something. At first, they thought it was a fault in the equipment, software glitch. But no one could explain the anomalies that were perfectly timed with the hum's fluctuations. No one could explain why the signal seemed to sync with their movements, why it followed them even when they left the lab. And that's when it started happening. The sound followed them outside. The first time it occurred, Dr. Farrow was in his apartment, long after hours, sitting in silence. He'd left the lab, but the hum had not left him. It filled the space around him, vibrating in his bones. At first, he tried to dismiss it as his mind playing tricks, the stress from too many sleepless nights. But as the night wore on, the hum grew louder, too loud, too clear, until it was no longer just an auditory sensation. It felt like something was pressing against him. He wasn't alone. He never had been. The second time it happened, Dr. Varga was working late, her mind a haze of equations and spectral anomalies. She'd returned to the lab to recheck the recordings from the previous day. But as she passed the door, she froze. The hum was coming from the hallway, from her own thoughts. She could hear it, faint like a voice calling from just beyond the door. And it wasn't just sound anymore. It was whispers, not just through the air but through the mind. A rhythmic pattern embedded into her thoughts, as though the black hole itself were speaking. No words, no language, but something far more unsettling. They tried to share their experiences. They spoke to each other of the hum, of the whispers, of the way the sound seemed to stretch and compress with time. But no one else heard it as they did. They were beginning to question their sanity, unsure if they had all lost the same thread. And then it got worse. The dreams started. At first, they were fleeting, distorted, images of space bending, of galaxies colliding. But then they became more vivid, more personal. Figures appeared in the dark, faces with no names, faces that shouldn't exist, emerging from the shadows, drawn toward the hum. Eyes that followed their every movement, voices that whispered their names in their sleep. Dr. Varga saw herself walking through the lab. But it wasn't her. It was a woman wearing her face. But her movements were slow, unnatural, as if she were being pulled by something invisible. She reached the telescope, placed her hand on the sensor panel, and then, nothing. The hum stopped. In the silence, she heard a voice without sound. It spoke to her, but not in language. Spoke in waves. The team tried to keep their composure. They tried to return to their research, to the cold precision of data. But the more they focused on the black hole, the more consumed they became by it. The hum was no longer just a sound, it was a presence. It wasn't trying to communicate with them, it was trying to possess them. The team began hearing the hum outside of the lab, at home, in the hallways, in their cars. It wasn't just an audible sound anymore. It was becoming part of their perception. It was warping their minds, like the hole was tearing through the fabric of their thoughts. And then came the final realization. The hum wasn't coming from the black hole. It was coming through the black hole. The black hole wasn't just listening to them. It was watching them. Not in the way of an object observing an event. Not with eyes, not with intention, but with awareness. A slow, deliberate awareness that reached through time and space. And then, on the final day, the silence came. They were all together in the lab. The hum had been growing louder for weeks, until it filled the room, until it filled the very air around them. They had come to accept it, to live with it, even to fear it. But that morning, as they sat, staring at the monitors, the hum finally stopped. The sound that had been their constant companion for months vanished. It wasn't just the noise. It was the presence. For the first time in what felt like eternity, they were alone. But not in relief. In emptiness. Because, as the silence stretched between them, they realized the truth. The black hole wasn't just a void of gravity. It wasn't a cosmic accident. It was a gate to something watching them. And now that the hum had stopped, they were the ones being watched. In the final moments, as the team filed out of the lab, their steps slow, their minds adrift, they understood. The black hole had never needed to speak. It had always been listening. And the question wasn't what it had been trying to say. The question was, who is listening now?